It's time for today's episode of the UGA Sports Live Podcast, recorded in front of a slightly tipsy studio audience at world-famous Champy's Fried Chicken. We will have the latest on Georgia Bulldogs football, basketball, and recruiting. Watch live and send us your questions on the 11 Alive Sports page on Facebook. Be advised this podcast is off the record and not safe for work. Also, be sure to subscribe to the UGA Sports Live Podcast on iTunes and Google Play.
Hey everybody, welcome to this edition, the 2019 edition of the UGA Sports Live Podcast with Jim Donnan, Jake Roos, and myself, Roddy Nabulsi. Coming at you from Champy's on Baxter Street, their home base. It's good to be back in town. We've been New Orleans, San Antonio, Orlando, Atlanta. We've been all over the place lately. It's good to be back home. Good to have some fantastic food. We're here at Champy's. They're going to bring us a salad because some of us may have overdone it during the holidays. And if you have a New Year's resolution and you want to eat healthy, a lot of people think, well, I can't go get fried chicken. Well, no, you come and have a salad. They have great salads here. They're going to bring us one in a minute. I'm going to need that one. I want to give a big shout-out to 11 Alive for letting us be on their page again. I think what happened was during the Christmas holidays, they kind of forgot to say, hey, enough's enough, and we kind of snuck in under the wire, and we're still doing 11 Alive, so big shout-out to them. And, of course, Athens Ford, Air and Overhead Doors, Your Pie, Academia Brewing Company, the IP all-day IPA. And what
I've got the Skull today, which is their farmhouse, Norwegian farmhouse style. A little funky, but it's good.
Yeah. Of course, 365 Game Day and our friends over at Cable East. So we'll talk about all them later in the show. We got so much to talk about since the last show we did was on signing day. Mm-hmm. We did, instead of doing it on Tuesday, we did it on Wednesday. Coach Donnan and I were here. You were actually on the road covering signing day, as is your job. He finally did his job. So Jake did a great job on signing day, and shout out to you and Trent for your predictions. Those were
not bad,
fantastic. So we had signing day, and then of course a week later was Christmas, and then there's a week later after that was New Year's Day. In between then, we had the Sugar Bowl where Georgia got manhandled up front. Justin Fields transferred. Georgia had 4 guys decide to go pro. So it's felt like a bunch of bad news, but there was some good news out in San Antonio while you were out there.
Yeah, as well as down at the Under Armour game in Orlando from Trent. So, it's definitely some great stuff.
So we've got a lot to cover, but first and foremost, I want to go to Coach Donnan, and I just want your take on that Alabama-Clemson game. I know this is a Georgia show, but that was the national title game. Georgia lost to Alabama. I thought that Notre Dame just looked terrible and Clemson wasn't that good, and then Clemson goes in and just mops the floor up with Alabama. Give me your take on the game, Coach.
Well, we talked about it, you and I, off the air last week, and I thought the real key was going to be whichever team could rush the other team's passer effectively. Clemson was able to do that with basically a 4-man rush and a few pressures, but Alabama got 0 pressure on Trevor Lawrence the whole night, and that was the difference because they've got some guys in the back end that are just not Alabama-type defensive backs, and that was pretty evident against us and against Oklahoma and last night against a very good passing attack. And they were able to run the ball, just when I say they, Clemson, just enough out of their 10 personnel, which is 4 wide receivers, which spreads you out pretty well. Some of the things we did against the Alabama team, were more with 2 tight ends, but everybody being spread. But I just thought it was a very good game plan, and it's pretty obvious that they got tremendous receivers. Their O-line gets a lot of credit for the way they protected them, and they just looked like they expected to win. They really weren't in awe of Alabama.
Not at all.
And they,
Not at all.
They just had a total victory, and it's pretty scary thinking about the freshmen on their team, and so many sophomores too, kind of like our team too in a lot of ways. But, we can reflect back on a lot of different things. We'll talk about the Texas game in a minute. But, bottom line, Clemson's here to stay for a little while. And, without question, Trevor is a very accomplished quarterback, very mature, and he can really throw the football with touch, with a lot of power, and a lot of good plays by design that they used on this team. I thought that the overwhelming thing beside the way the players played was the way the coaches coached. Yep. I thought Clemson really had a really good plan, and Alabama didn't have any answers for it. They didn't have many against us either. I think it's a situation where you lose a guy like Kirby Smart and Mel Tucker one year, and the next year you lose a guy like Jeremy Pruitt, and then replace them with guys. It's hard to get that kind of veteran people on your defensive staff, and that told in that game, in my opinion, just because I thought they really schemed them and just outcoached them.
I want to ask you one thing I saw on Twitter today, and I'll put it to both of you actually, because I knew that this reaction was coming. I just didn't know when it would be. Somebody said this is the beginning of the end of the Alabama dynasty.
Well, it didn't help it, that's for sure. I don't know that it's the end, because somebody said they were ranked number 1 in recruiting right now. Is that right?
That is correct.
That is correct. So, and they're going to have a tremendous amount of guys leave early, too. I mean, we had 4, but they're going to have some really good juniors come out.
Wait, you mean that happens to other teams too,
I mean,
not just Georgia?
That was we'll go over that, too. But I just think you build your team for the long haul, and Alabama's built for the long haul, just like we're building ours. They got a long head, both Alabama and Clemson got a head start on us. But as we said so many times during the year, this was a year where we were, this was just a pennies from heaven year, and the fact that we weren't supposed to be that great, and we took advantage of our schedule and played well, but didn't finish up like we needed to against Texas, because, I predicted it'd be a long time before we lost again, but, I didn't realize that some of those defensive players wouldn't play and that our offensive, just couldn't move the ball on them. But the realism of everything that we're saying here today is there's some really good football teams in the country, but there's only about 5 or 6 that are on a different level, and the only one I see coming close to making a move at this point would be the 2 in the West, LSU and Texas A&M. I just don't see anybody threatening us. Florida maybe a little bit in the East, but for the East to have 3 teams in the top 12 in the country, pretty impressive. You got Kentucky with that win. They finished up 12th. Florida's one behind us. We were 7th. And 3 teams from the East in the top 12 in the country, pretty impressive.
And Kentucky's going to lose a lot, and Georgia's just adding. Georgia's percentage points, fraction of a percentage behind Alabama in the recruiting rankings. When the final rankings come out, some guys might move up, some guys will move down. Georgia still has spots to fill. I think Alabama has 26 commits.
It seems like
they can sign 28. But now here's the thing: you only count the top 20 in each recruiting class. So you take Georgia's top 20 and compared to Alabama's top 20, and they are neck and neck. So Georgia is right there. Yes, they lost to Texas in this game, and I think people are making way too much out of this Texas loss. I know you wanted to go in and make a statement and say, hey, we should have been in the playoffs. Yes, you were better than Notre Dame, and yes, you were better than Oklahoma. You didn't show that against Texas, but if you go into that game without your defensive coordinator, without your defensive analyst and Tyson Summers, who's a great defensive mind, you take away the best cornerback on your team, the best cornerback you've had come through in quite some time, a guy who's a first-round draft pick, first guy to win you a national award there in some time. You take your best sack guy and DeAndre Walker out of the game. He's injured. You take away, and this is going to sound weird, but I'd say you take away your best defensive lineman. I'm not taking a shot at
Jordan
Davis. I'm not saying anything against Jonathan Ledbetter, but if you need a guy to clog up the middle, stop the run, put some pressure on him, I think Jordan Davis is a difference maker. So I'm not trying to bang on Georgia's defensive line by saying you took away your best defensive lineman, but you took away your most disrupting defensive lineman. Take away all those guys and tell Kirby Smart, instead of managing the entire team, you have to manage the defense because you're down one coach and an analyst. Then you throw a team out there who was not interested in that game. They said they were. We hounded the players that we could talk to relentlessly. Are you excited to be in this game? Do you want to be in this game? What are your thoughts in this game? And they said the right things. They were coached up. They said, we're happy to be here. We're excited about this. And you heard about the practice. We heard the practices were very competitive. These guys.
But that's easy. I mean, I'm just going to stand up for one thing. That's easy to say because of the way we got slapped around that we weren't ready. But we really practiced hard. I mean, over Christmas I was able to go over there more than normal because, just had some time, and I watched them, and we really went hard against each other and practiced hard.
Yeah,
I just think the bottom line, when you look at it, was the fact that we didn't react to adversity like we needed to. We hadn't been challenged like that. In some games where we had those mistakes so early, the kicking game mistakes, and the offense was rolling. Even against Alabama, we rolled in the first half, and we just went out there and they really made some good calls on defense, and we expected because of their size that we could run over them, and we weren't able to do it, which was a miscalculation, and it took us a long time to change in that. We kept thinking we'd be able to do it, but they kept making the plays. Our offense is based on hat, and they always had an extra guy, and we didn't pick it up. So I think it's easy to say because we got beaten by a so-called inferior team, but a team that was really motivated, was trying to make a statement, and maybe we're selling the ranch a little bit on defense, taking some defensive chances. Then you can slam the kids a little bit, but I don't.
No, I'm not slamming.
I'm just saying for anybody to say that we weren't interested in the game. You got too many young guys that never been in that kind of atmosphere to not be interested.
And they played well.
And you got a guy like Devad comes out there and plays 66 snaps and hadn't played in the game all year. You mentioned Aziz
Ojulari
as a guy to watch for, but. He and Hall and G and Jaw, hey, we got slapped around physically in that game, and that worries you a little bit.
Right, but that was the second part of my thing is you lost those guys on defense. So I understand Texas scoring 28 points. I get it. But Georgia only scoring 21 points when you got Cade Mays back.
With an incredibly subpar performance on the offensive line.
Probably
the worst of the year.
And dropping balls missing. But, I think we got to do this show because you got to rehash it. It's the last thing. But I'd just take up for the kids and the preparation. I think our kids really wanted to play. They just they weren't ready for that kind of, after being such a tremendous letdown of not winning that other game. I think they thought it was going to be a lot easier than it was, and by the time they figured it out, it didn't work out. But
I take that lack of response, lack of desire to win. You saw, like you said, Texas came in to win this game. They came in to make a statement. Georgia expected to, but then when they got slapped in the face, didn't respond. And to me, that is, I don't say unprepared because they were prepared, but they did not want it as bad as Texas did, which tells me they didn't want to be there as bad as Texas did. Texas needed it, and Georgia didn't.
That's your opinion.
I know it's probably wrong. It's always
that's
wrong.
A good opinion to have. I mean, but I think we wanted it. They just took it from us. And that happens sometimes. It happens sometime in games. To me, this was a lot bigger upset than the LSU game. I mean, we just played so poorly against LSU that we didn't have a chance. But we had a chance in this game. Just every time we had it, we didn't make anything happen. But
Tony Garman says that was a huge game for Texas, and you knew. I mean, to be on that stage, to be in that
program-defining game.
Absolutely, that's the kind of thing that Tom Herman had been waiting for—a signature win on the big stage against a big team like that. I think it was definitely an important win for them. Also, shout out to Colin Johnson. That kid was badass, man. That kid is good.
They made third down, we didn't. They made fourth down, we didn't. Their kicking game was good, ours was bad. I want
to go back to the first two punts. Okay, you have one, the guy's knees down, you lose 14 yards on the punt. The next punt is 11 yards. So in two punts, you netted minus 3 yards.
Yeah, but our defense really played pretty well in the first half because of the field position that they were under. Except for the first drive. I mean, we were hanging on field position, but it's just always hard. And I know we got to do this show to rehash things about, and I can take the punishment of these questions, but I just think as an old coach that's been under a lot of kickoffs, we stole this year as far as our momentum. To be 7th in the country after all these games are played, I feel good about where we are and where we're going, although I'm disappointed that we didn't do better because we could have stole even more, you know what I mean? But going into the year with all the guys we had to replace and all the youth, so it was a a great job of running roughshod through the Eastern Division. Nobody even close to us in the Eastern Division in the games. But, people don't want to hear that, and I don't blame them. You want to win the league. And we had a shot to win.
We had a shot to win the league.
We had a shot to win the league. And it's pretty obvious that we're close to Bama. I mean, look at it. But the thing now is, how do you compare to Clemson?
Yeah. I had someone send
there
me
we go.
Fantastic. There's
right.
that wonderful salad. I had someone send me a tweet last night, and I apologize for not remembering who it was, but they said, you always see people in colleges all over the world holding up signs saying, "We want Bama, we want Bama." He says, they're not going to hold up "We want Clemson" sign. They're going to keep holding up "We want Bama" because nobody wants Clemson right now. And I know I don't want to talk about a whole lot of Clemson stuff, but to the point of where Georgia is on that national stage, and a lot of people said, "Oh, Georgia's it's the same old Georgia." No, it's not. When you look at the fact that you had to replace the guys we mentioned on defense, and you're putting freshmen out there, you take DeAndre Baker off, you got Tyson Campbell, Eric Stokes, redshirt freshman, Devon Wilson playing in his first game. Your 3 defensive backs, on the front are freshmen.
McGee got hurt, didn't he? I mean, they are nickel guy, so that's why you put Devon in.
Yeah.
But
I can just say this.
What time is it right now?
12:17.
We'll never be in the rest of the career here any worse on defense. And I guess it's not worse. Our personnel, our defensive structure, everything about our defense will be better than this year from now on.
Yeah.
This was a rebuilding year on defense.
You see those 14 early enrollees Georgia picked up?
Our defensive personnel is getting ready to be really good. I mean, you add Stevenson to that corner group. You got a situation where people might be saying, "What are you going to do with Webb? Are you going to put him back as a receiver?" This guy can be a pro corner. So we got to get better play out of our safety sometimes, just like anybody. But
here comes Lewis Sign.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm happy about our personnel a lot more than I am distraught about us losing to Texas.
I want to say this, and I'm interested in your take, Coach. One thing that surprised me leading up to this game was all the smoke that the players created on social media.
Yeah, that was not smart.
I was surprised to see that. That seemed uncharacteristic.
Yeah, and I think after it happened, I think they put the squelch on it. But those are kids, and that's the way they do things nowadays. I mean, you find out. Somebody will tell me something. I said, "Where'd you hear that?" And said, "Well, it was on Twitter, so that makes it, that makes it right."
Real.
But that's a way for them to express themselves, and they got to be distraught about losing to Alabama because it was there. But at the same time, we had a chance to be in there, but we lost to LSU, so you really can't. And Kirby mentioned that too. Hey, you had your chance to win, and we didn't do it. And but we were certainly among the better 5 or 6 teams. And I think after watching Ohio State against Washington, except the way they set on it in the fourth quarter, it's pretty obvious they're pretty talented too.
Absolutely.
Oklahoma showed what they're capable of. I mean, those top 5 or 6 teams, including LSU, I mean, pretty strong.
Yeah, but you're there. A lot of people.
LSU played them with their second team defense, Central Florida.
Yeah, and they still won. My point is, if you're trying to read too much into the Sugar Bowl loss, you're trying too hard. Again, Coach says it mattered to the players, whether it did or didn't. In the overall picture, it didn't matter. It didn't hurt you in recruiting.
Yeah.
And with the guys that you're replacing, the guys that are out there, now Devon Wilson has 66 snaps that he didn't have before. Azeez Ojulari, coming off an ACL injury, almost had a sack.
I told you.
Yeah, you did. I knew that was coming too. I might as well just
set me up for it.
Leave a little softball, just take it deep. You got the Adam Anderson and Brenton Cox. The young guys getting out there. And remember, when you looked up the right-hand side of your offensive line, 2 freshmen. And I'm trying not to make it too big of a deal.
Both of them made freshman All-American too.
Exactly.
Along with Jordan Davis.
So you got those guys out there. And then you're adding in this number 2, possibly number 1 class behind the number 1 class you signed last year. You've got some coaching issues. I don't mean issues, but you've got some coaching
turnover.
Yeah, exactly. So Kirby's got to bring in another coach to either coach a secondary, be defensive coordinator. We'll discuss that in a minute. But don't go around flagellating yourself, with the cat of 9 tails because you lost the Sugar Bowl. You're going to be fine. You're going to come into the 2019 season with a fantastic group of players. So
absolutely.
To me, this is the first game that we lost that we should have won since Georgia Tech 2 years ago. The rest of the games, any way you look at it, you can't say Texas is a better team than us, but they were on that night.
They were that day.
But things like that, that's how you lose games. But we've won the games we're supposed to win and been very good in the other one except the LSU game this year. But, man, that game the other night just didn't look like us offensively.
No, not at all.
And, when you get pressured like that and you're not catching the ball and you're not throwing it, you just can't miss those times on the field. I mean, they're a ball control team, which was smart, kept the ball away from
35 minutes.
That Ellinger kid, which we had the scouting report on him, and I know that you had a great report there from, I thought you were on Bourbon Street all the time, but you're actually doing it. But that kid was possessed in that game.
He was. He played out of his mind.
You read all that stuff about how he grew up wanting to be a Texas quarterback and all that. But very physical, but he's a really good passer too. And we got trouble in the secondary if we don't get rush. I mean, we're not a pass team that gets sacks, but we make people hurry. But I mean, he had plenty of time to throw, and he was very, very effective.
And then we tucked it and run. We couldn't get a hand on him. Speaking of changing minds, I'm going to tell you a quick story, holiday story. So I go down to pick my dad up to take him out to dinner the day or two after, the day after Christmas, 26th. Because the 27th, we went to Rising Seniors, and we have a lot of reports from that. I go down to pick him up, and we're getting into my Ford Explorer. Got to remember, my father worked for General Motors for 26 or 27 years. So he's a big GM guy. And before this, I'm driving a GMC Sierra. So we're getting in the Ford, and my dad's like, Radi, what the hell is this? He's just not happy at all. I'm like, Dad, it's a Ford. He's like, I know it's a Ford. Why are you driving it? You know that you can get a deal through General Motors as my son. You should have a GM car. Damn it. He cusses a lot more than that.
Yeah, I don't think the damn it was the only one.
Yeah. So Dad just, and we get into it, and he's older. He's having a hard time getting in and out of it. And I move the seat up and lower it down. He's like, oh, that's nice. I turn the seat warmers on. He's like, oh, that's very nice. and then the screen pops up, and we're backing out the driveway. It's that giant screen. And you can just see him. He's like, okay, I like this. He's moving the seat around, and he had a good time. We drove and had...
It won the old man over.
It did. So if you can take a 27-year GM employee and make him think that a Ford is a fantastic vehicle, that's what it takes. If you go by Athens Ford, our guys here, big sponsor of our season, big sponsor of the website, big sponsor of this show. If they can convert him to a Ford, they can convert you to one. So I want you to go out to Athens Ford, take a test drive, let them know that you heard about it on the podcast. That'd be lovely, and give them a shot. See if they can change your mind. I mean, my wife is a Honda person. I drove GMC for years. Ford is converting everybody that we get into our vehicle. So just get it when you get a chance. And it's not just a Ford Explorer. That F-150, best-selling truck in America for a reason. There's a reason. If you get into it, it's unreal. So try that out. If you don't want something as big as the Explorer, try the Escape. It's a little bit smaller, but you can still put a ton of stuff into it. So, and I really want to try that Escape. I think they call it RS. It's like this...
It got a little juice to it.
It's got, sporty version. That thing will take off. So if you get a chance, try that out.
All right, we've got some questions I want to dive into here. After that performance the other night, a lot of people wanting to know, what's next year look like. Obviously, they want us to play prognosticator. We're happy to do so. Brent Tucker says, "What do you expect to be the most improved part of the defense next year? Where do you see the biggest improvement?"
Secondary.
Okay. Well, I think the secondary as a whole, talent-wise, is going to be a lot better. But I think the overall defensive pressure is going to be there to help the secondary. So I would say the biggest improvement would be not so much sacks, but pass rushing with guys like Anderson and Cox and all these guys. And
Nolan Smith.
And then you add Nolan Smith. And then
Jermaine Johnson.
You talk about a guy that JJ looks good. And then you got that kid, that basketball player, looked good, 44 the other night. The guy,
Trevon
Walker.
Oh, yes. God.
I tell you what, when I got a D lineman that can dunk, then that makes my mouth water.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he's a very change the game type of guy. But I just think overall defense will be better starting with our inside linebacker talent.
Yeah.
Maybe not so much the experience, but the type of guys. If you look at our composite inside and outside linebacker based on the stars that they had coming in, those are some pretty effective looking guys on the hoof and their background. You know, you look for Tyndall and Walker to make big changes in what they're doing, and then you got these four coming in. We got some backers coming in. You put Dean in there. I mean,
Kobe Dean.
Yeah, you got
Ryan
the number
Davis.
one inside and outside backers in the country, and the number one DN. Those three guys. That's like having number one draft choice, like having Khalil Mack come in there and play for Chicago. And you know, you look at what those two players, Khalil Mack and Roquan Smith, did for their team, and the effect they had being a great player on the outside and a great player on the inside. I can see the same thing with Nolan Smith and Dean and Johnson. These guys just adding to our defense. I think our defense will make, as much as our offense should be really good, I think our defense is going to be gangbusters.
You stole mine, and I was going to say inside linebacker, because there were times this season where when Monty went down, there was a little bit of hand wringing and people saying, "What's going to happen? Where's the guy who's going to step up behind him?" There wasn't anybody quite like him to fill that void when he was out. You had a couple of guys who were capable players. Look, Jawan Taylor was a guy who played a lot this season and played well for the most part, but he's not Monty Rice, and he's not that same skill set. You got a guy in Nakobe Dean who plays a lot like Monty, plays a lot like Roquan, you know, that fast sideline-to-sideline guy. You've got some power guys with Quay and Channing Tyndall. I think Ryan Davis is a guy who reminds me of what Kirby was doing at Alabama with those bigger guys. Some of those giant inside linebackers he had.
Reggie Ragland type.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You've got a lot of versatility within that room now, and I think that's going to be a big key for shaping how things go.
Yeah, and I think that the real question mark there a little bit is those two guys that won't be able to practice this spring. Davis coming off of ACL surgery, and then Marshall. What's the guy's name?
Tresman, yeah. Tresman Marshall with the shoulder
deal. So neither one of those guys, but they'll get a lot of meeting time and a lot of really good reps. I tell you, I saw that kid on the day that I left practice over here. Remember last year when I was over here at my memory is not as good as it used to be, but I told you guys.
Bowl practice. You saw Jordan Davis.
I saw Jordan Davis and Channing Tyndall. I said, if we got about 20 more like this, things look good. Well, the same thing the other day when I saw Webb, Johnson, the defensive back, DJ Daniel, and then Marshall. I mean, those four guys, boarding house pie.
Really good question here, and this one just popped up, so we'll get to some of our other ones. But
you mean some of them aren't good?
Well, this is a really strong one, though. All
right.
Ronnie Brown,
Ronnie's
great commenter. Yeah, he's always got some great stuff for us. He says this question is way too early, but is there any guy that you see taking advantage and benefiting the most from this early enrolling period? I know who I'm going to go with, and that's Tyreke Stevenson. I think that he was so tremendous out in San Antonio at the All-American game. The one bad thing that you had to say about him was that he's a little out of shape. He's got a little bit of a pot belly right now. He's been hitting the Christmas ham a little hard. But he was still super fast. No matter the fact that he had the extra weight on.
His length, though, his long arms, get on.
Kick and fly.
But and I guarantee you'll see a tremendous movement by Tyson Campbell too. He didn't have the benefit of the spring like Devod Wilson did, and the meetings is our system, as I've told you, is very intricate, and there's a lot to pick up. And I think having that meeting time all spring and all summer is going to really help Stevenson come in here too. But we got. You got to give Coley a lot of credit on Stevenson, too, because you lose Tucker and you don't have a defensive coordinator and you're fighting that Miami deal. Even though Miami
that's a hell of a landing.
But Coley hung in there tight with that family, and kid believed in him and Kirby, and knowing that Kirby will get a good secondary coach. But that's a dog fight down in Miami. I tell you, I remember when I used to recruit there from Oklahoma, and And then when I started recruiting here, it's hard to get a kid to leave there, but and it's going to be harder now with Diaz because they're going to really make a big push there. I mean, I hear they're going after some Clemson coaches. I don't know if they're going to get them, but they're trying to.
Shout out to James Coley for his work there. Been a
well, that's why in the previous question
that's
I said.
What I just said.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I
get lost. You're throwing so much info at me.
You're the man there. But
you're throwing so much info at me. I'm sorry.
I turned his headphones off. He couldn't hear you.
No, that's okay. I understand that. You got to do everything, but go ahead and give a shout out to Coley, too, will you?
Yeah. You know who we haven't talked about is James Coley. I think we should give James Coley some credit on this show because we haven't mentioned him before.
Yeah.
To get back to the question, I say Jermaine Johnson. Because that's a guy who needs to come in. You get a JUCO guy for immediate impact. You need him to come in, have that immediate impact. If he's here in the spring practicing, he learns the system. We've seen, and this is not just at Georgia, we've seen JUCO kids go into complicated defenses. Not to say that what he's doing is as complicated as the secondary, but we've seen guys who don't know the offense, don't know the defense, and the JUCO guy just wastes his time at Alabama, Tennessee, Florida, you name the school. Everyone's had a JUCO bust, and the kid's really good. It takes him too long to learn it. So having him here, I think, is going to be big. And that's the reason I
have a lot of competition there, though.
He does, but that's what I'm saying. Increased competition. So that's the guy who needs the spring the most.
He does, but that was the question. I thought we said the impact the most.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, the guy who's going to benefit, I guess.
Oh, okay.
From it. Yeah. And so if you haven't gone over to Twitter, go check out Kirby Smart's post from last night. He introduces all the new guys. They're all standing around, hanging out, playing a little bit of pool. Yes, I can. Tramel Walthour, Lewis Sine, Tresman Marshall, Nolan Smith, Jermaine Johnson,
Smart.
Clay Webb, Stetson Bennett,
Dwan Mathis?
Dwan, yes. You got Warren McClendon there, Ryan Davis, Rylan Godey, DJ Daniel, and N'Kobe Dean. The only guy not featured in this one was Tyreke Stevenson.
Any concerns there?
No, I don't think so. Not at all. But
what do you mean, that he's not here?
Yeah.
That he wasn't in the picture, yeah.
He was in the bathroom.
But if you haven't,
some ham.
if you haven't checked out the picture, go look at it.
Ham.
Jermaine Johnson looks like a man. I mean, he's dead center in the photo. He's hard to miss. He's wearing the G hoodie.
He's a foot taller than Nolan Smith. There's something wrong there.
Yeah, and this is perspective at play here. I mean, look how big Tramel Walthour looks.
And
then you got Jermaine Johnson standing in the back, and he still looks like a dog. So that guy, huge impact coming for that guy, in my opinion.
Kirby teaches him how to play pool. First right out of the box.
All right, we got a couple more questions here rolling in. Rick Martin with an interesting one. Obviously, you lost Isaac Nada to the NFL draft. Luke Ford announces that he's going to transfer to Illinois, get a little bit closer to home. So that experiment done. A little thinner than I think people are used to in the tight end room. So Rick wants to know, what's Georgia going to do about the tight end position going into this upcoming year?
I want you to explain about the JUCO that you're going to tell us about, but I could see us taking a grad transfer or a JUCO at that position because Chaney and Kirby like to run the, two tight end stuff, but we'll just have to see there. But I think it's a blow to lose those two guys because of their – first of all, how much Nada brings to the table leadership-wise and the way he works and his ability, and I think he's going to go a lot higher than people project him. I think all of us need to take into account that Kirby helps these guys by making them play special teams. So when the draft comes up, they're going to see all these guys like Nada, and they're going to see Holyfield covering punts and blocking on punt protection and all that. And that might be the difference in a draft in the whole round for them, not to mention Ridley and what he's been able to do with it too. So, but I think Fitzgerald, is that his name? Fitzpatrick and Godey will help us there. But what's the JUCO guy that you were hearing about?
Yeah, no, I think that they're going to do I think that a JUCO guy is going to come into play. I'm not exactly sure. The guy that we were monitoring was Travis Kuntz. He ended up signing with Texas Tech in December, so it's going to be interesting. But I'm not writing off.
Go there for it. Ain't gonna throw it tight in.
I'm not writing off any options there. Like I said, I totally agree with you. Grad transfer or a JUCO guy. And then I
Nolan
also
Smith, tight end.
I also think that you could see some work there. I think that people asking about who's this early enrollment period benefit most. I think Rylan Godey's a guy that it really helps a lot with. He's a very competent blocker, big-bodied kid. He's going to put some weight on. He's going to be able to fulfill that role that, frankly, they wanted Luke Ford to fill last year and hope that he would kind of get into. He was more of a pass catcher, but they need a big blocking tight end. And I think that Godey's going to fulfill some of that, what you lose with Jackson Harris, for example.
Well, you look at the way we won the Kentucky game and the way we moved the ball against both Alabama and Auburn against really good defensive fronts. Our 12 personnel was awesome there with Werner and Nauta protecting the edge and our wide receivers blocking on the perimeter. So that's a big part of Coach Chaney's offense is to run those two tight ends. We used to call it bison personnel, 12, two tight ends, two wide receivers, and a back. But and in the case of Holyfield, how many more carries is he going to get next year when you got a guy like Zeus coming in and Cook getting better?
Yes.
I don't see him
and
getting
DeAndre Swift healthy.
I don't see him getting as many carries, and you got to look at it from his standpoint. And he did a heck of a job for us. I mean, he's never been the feature guy for 3 years because he's been behind some really good backs. Not that he was behind Swift, but I'm just saying I think he's got a really good chance to way he can catch the ball and cover kicks and all. I think he'll be a good pro back.
No, I totally agree. I totally agree on that. I think that it's going to be interesting to see. Alvin Todd did mention, Godey does have the ACL that he's coming back from, but I think I want to say that was a little bit earlier than Ryan Davis in the season. So
he'll probably be limited, but again, invaluable the meeting time and just the fact. If everybody puts yourself in a position of being a freshman in college, all the orientation, going to class, getting situated, all that stuff is very difficult. But when you're playing football at the same time and trying to make an SEC team and you're coming in here in August doing it, it's overwhelming. But if you come in January, you don't have the games pending, you don't have everything like that. You can go home some on the weekends. It's one of the best things ever invented, this early enrollment.
We're gonna talk some changes here and the possibility of that here in just a second. But Roddy, I want to hit on you.
Well, you want to talk about question though? Don Blaylock can't come in because of the way the way their school's set up.
That's correct. Yeah,
right. We've seen that before. You talk about changes. I want folks to go outside, look at your house, and look at your ugly garage door, and I want you to change it to a good-looking garage door. Call our friends at Aaron Overhead Doors, AARON, not that other overhead door company, but this is Aaron Overhead Doors. It's run by a Georgia grad, big Georgia guy. I don't know if Ryan Lucia and his boys were down in New Orleans. It wouldn't surprise me if they were, but
they were watching.
They were watching, and again, huge Georgia guys. And this is not a guy who grew up deciding, "Hey, I want to be in the overhead door business." This was a guy who grew up wanting to be in customer service. He just happens to run a overhead door business. So if you're looking for great customer service and to improve the value of your house, instead of that 6-panel, 7-panel, 5-panel ugly garage door, you can get one from them that has the wood fronts, the beautiful windows in it. That's going to change the entire look of your house. Swing by Aaron Overhead Doors. Also, they sponsor our 321 report. Go check out UGASports.com. We have a very in-depth Georgia 321 report. It's 3 observations, 2 questions, 1 prediction. There's a lot in there about coaching issues. Coaching rumors. There's a lot in there about the game. There's a lot in there about guys going pro. I detail a couple conversations I had with a couple of the guys that were going pro. That's what made me think of it. But if you're looking for a change, and hey, if you just need to get your garage door fixed, it's a new year, you get a New Year's resolution, you want your actual garage door opener to work or not squeak like crazy or not sound like you've got a truck that's trying to back out in between 2 cars and it's stuck in there, Aaron Overhead Doors can fix that for you. So swing by Aaron Overhead Doors and check them out.
Yes. This one I thought was also a good one because a lot of people walked away from that game, I think the Sugar Bowl, wondering the same thing. I know I did. I was watching this guy, and I said, that was a head-scratcher of a performance. Stanhope Ligon says, Does Richard LeCount start at safety next year? Love the kid's athleticism, but he's got to learn to wrap up. I was surprised to see Richard with so many arm tackles in that game.
Well, by that same rationale, does Jeremiah Holloman start at wide receiver? Does do you change quarterbacks? I mean, do you change your right guard? There are guys in that game that had a very poor performance.
Yeah.
You base it on one game. And our friends at Pro Football Focus did a great job in that Georgia 3-2-1, talking about how Georgia was the third best team in the nation last year at having the fewest missed tackles, only about 10%. They jumped to 14% in this game.
The only problem was we missed them in the LSU and the Texas game. That's what comes back to haunt you in losing performances, bad kicking, turnovers, anything
missed tackles and penalties
happens to you, and it bit us in the butt in that game for sure. If you got a chance to make a play and get off the field, you got to get off the field. I mean, that was the thing last night with Alabama. Third down, they got destroyed on third down. They looked good a lot on first and second down, but that one drive when they made 3 different one-hand catches, I mean, you knew it wasn't.
Oh my God, Justin Ross is a freak.
You know it wasn't in the cards for him.
Yeah. I'll say this on the LeCount thing. I think Lewis Sign. Look, Richard LeCount is either going to respond or he's going to get it. He's going to lose his job because that kid plays so physically. He hits just the way that those guys want him to. I mean, LeCount is a great player. Richard has done great things to this point. Very athletic,
great team leader.
Mentioned. Yeah, a very vocal guy. I just think that Lewis has a skill set that's going to push him, and that may be very good for Richard.
I think that is a great analogy to what you were talking about, Jawan Taylor, Tay Crowder. There are guys behind him who are less experienced, but who have more physical tools. Those are going to push the guys with better experience, better eye discipline, who know the game, have been around longer. So LeCount is going to have to push, and I thought J.R. Reed had a good game. He's coming back. There's a positive, folks, but I wouldn't discount Richard on the one game.
Never. Tony Griffin says, do you expect D-Rob to have a larger part in the offense next year?
He's going to have. Could he have less? That's going to be a situation. What he's talking about, larger part as far as something like what we saw with most of the receivers. It was a tough year for him, adjusting and getting into the physical part of it. But I do think that he won't have as many guys knowing what to do at the slot receiver that in front of him, it's just a given when you got Terry in there and Crumpton and Miko, they can do that stuff. And then he can't block like these guys. Now, we might look at some different stuff with him, and that goes with what we said about our tight ends. Since we might not have as many tight ends, we might go with some 10 stuff where we have 4 wide receivers and 2 slot guys instead of 3 with a tight end. So he's got a skill set that we don't have really as far as the home run type thing right now. And if he'll just go ahead and he's handling it pretty well. I mean, he certainly had some adversity not getting to play, but I think spring practice will be huge for him.
I think you're going to see a lot of Demetrius Robertson next year. I just don't. Kirby Smart knows talent. He plays talent. Demetrius Robertson is one of the most talented kids we've ever covered.
Right. You got to get big play. We got to start getting more big plays.
I mean, get him the damn ball. This isn't complicated.
You watch some of these teams. It's hard to make a 80, 90-yard march, like we had to do so many times this year. And we did it against teams that were equal to us or less, but it's hard to do it against a really great team. You got to get some big plays.
That's a guy on the simple slant can take it 60 yards.
Absolutely. Right? Every time you get it into his hands.
The guy has, you get your guy with your inside leverage or whatever, and he takes that slant and he outruns that guy. The guy has him lined up for a tackle, and we have seen him just outstride a guy, cut up field, and then the safety's trying to come over to get him. It's a 60-yard gain. It's exactly what Miko did. They're the same player, just Demetrius is taller.
Yes.
And Miko will block better.
Brent Tucker says, will Georgia ever be an elite team without an elite defensive tackle? I think Jordan Davis is going to be an elite defensive tackle. I think that
they got Trayvon Walker now.
Oh, Lord.
I guarantee. Where does he live?
So this question doesn't matter anymore.
Where does he live?
Let's see. Where's Brent live?
It's a good question, Brent, but
He's,
I guarantee you, come up
down
this-
Warner Robins.
Come up here in summer when they have meet the team and look at Walker. You'll see an elite-looking guy, and he'll play.
It is a
but
good question,
99 right now is elite. I mean, for you to be chosen one of the top 22 players in the country as a true freshman and not even have the benefit of spring practice and wasn't even starting.
Well, he missed the first 4 or 5 games.
They were redshirting him.
Yeah.
And then he comes on gangbusters. I mean, I think he's an elite player.
Yeah,
I would agree.
But no, he does have a good
And
point.
that's nothing against him. We haven't had any, that's for sure.
Sure.
Yes.
I'm 100%.
It's a great question.
It was a really good question, but I do feel like, contrary to what Gus Malzahn said, the barn's not in the hay. Did you see that? Did you see that? What he said?
Did he really say that?
He did.
He said it on TV.
Oh,
I
my
sent
God.
you that on the Roddy and Jake platform. You don't even read. You don't listen. You don't read. Very seldom shoot text, but he said
He's
that.
terrible. He's like, yeah, the
He
hay
got a
is
little
in the
nervous.
barn.
He got a little nervous. It's like old Coach
God,
Coach Peterson used to get confused at Florida State. I'm the head coach, and don't you remember it?
he did. He's like the barn is in the hay. You know, I'm like, what? Let's repeat that.
Let's see.
Before you get that, I want to give
yeah.
a quick shout out to our friends at Europe, Natalie and Drew French. If you are tired of you're done with ham,
Yes.
swing by Europe and pick up a. You don't have to swing by. You can actually go online, order ahead, swing by and pick it up. And here's the thing: if you actually go into Europe, it only takes like 7 minutes to get a pizza. I know if you're, and I'm going to throw them under the bus. I don't go to Mellow Mushroom anymore. Not just because Europe sponsors our show, but I don't have the time. It takes forever to go in there, sit down, and get a pizza. It just drives me crazy. But if you actually go to Europe, you walk in, you tell them what you want, the crust, the sauce, all the toppings, and it's not. They don't charge you per topping. You use as many as you want.
Yeah, just load it up.
Load it up. Then they turn around, they pop it in that oven while you're paying. And by the time you've got your, they have those Coke machines. You get all, it's like 350 different variations or whatever. Or they have fantastic beers. They will have Academia, the IQ IPA that I'm drinking. They have it on tap out there. At least a lot of them they do.
Yep.
I've seen Founders. I've seen Southern Brewing Company. I've seen they carry a ton of Georgia beers, microbrews and stuff. And by the time you sit down, you've had a couple sips. Here's your pizza. Now, let's say you don't have time to sit down in there.
Or maybe you have social anxiety like I do, and you get up there and you freeze because there's too many options, and
there's a guy behind you tapping his foot.
Yeah, and the guy says, "What do you want?" And you're just trying to process it all. Look, get it done online.
Yeah.
Go ahead, stop in and pick it up.
It's like the way I do public sandwiches. They tell me, here's how I want it. I send in the order, then I go by pick it up. That way I don't have to sit there and wait on it.
Yeah, that way you don't have to be embarrassed when they make it in front of everybody.
This is very true.
Can you add more tenders? More tenders.
Yeah, that's that kind of scares them a bit. So, big shout out to Europe and their sponsorship of us. But while I'm talking about the beer here, you're drinking the Skol?
The Skol, Norwegian Farmhouse, yes.
I'm drinking the IQ
Is it
IPA.
SKOAL?
I think it's SKOL, but with an umlaut on the O.
With a what?
Umlaut.
What?
Doesn't have any tobacco
A
in
sideways colon.
I just want to keep making you
it.
say
No
umlaut.
tobacco in it, right?
No. Not brewed with Skull wintergreen or anything of that nature.
Yeah, put a little between your cheek and gum.
There you
That's
go.
just what we're doing with this beer. Big shout out to our friends. They got us some new glasses out here from Academia Brewing Company. I'm drinking their IQ IPA. And again, Jake knows I'm not a huge IPA guy. I'm more of the. I had picked up some Andy Gator while I was down in New Orleans.
You have a child's palate for beer.
I do. I like thick malty beers,
Child's palate.
but I will drink that stuff all day long. I love this IQ IPA.
And we went out and had lunch with them right before we went on break there. We went out to Academia, had a great meal, great lunch, got all kinds of beers, and it was a great time out there.
So you get a chance. I know that a lot of the games are down, but remember there's NFL playoffs. They will have them out there on those giant screens. And this is not just a brewing company. They have a chef in there, an honest-to-God chef who also went to Georgia, who makes fantastic meals. Again, best scallops I've ever eaten in my life, and I've eaten them around the world. Was in Athens, Georgia, when I went to Academia Brewing Company. Unreal. There's a guy out there, he's a master with fish. He does wonderful things. They have half-price wings on Monday. They have a prime rib night. I mean, come on. Just follow Academia Brewing Company online. Follow them on Facebook. They post some of their ridiculous sandwiches over there. They post stuff on on Twitter as well. Follow them, see what their specials are, and they also have live music all the time. So, again, if you're looking for a place to eat in Athens, swing by Academia Brewing Company, and you can now go out and buy some of their beers.
All right, now time for my segment. Let's talk about some of these recruiting showcases.
Let's skip that and get something important. No, I paid for this. You better have some good stuff.
No, yeah, it was a big recruiting season. Like we said, we were in San Antonio. We were in Orlando. Got to see both of the major all-star games this season, as we always do, certainly the last 5 years. So, any thoughts, questions that you have for me?
Yes.
Okay.
Georgia's got 22 commits.
Yes, currently.
They're probably going to sign 3 or 4 more.
Yeah, that's very possible. And you could. It depends on what happens. Plumlee's still up in the air. So,
right. Yeah. So the question for those who don't follow the ins and outs of recruiting day in and day out, who are they getting?
Isn't that the easiest question?
Yes, exactly.
No, I think that the names.
Who are they trending up with?
All right, here are the names to watch. All right, I'll give you those. Definitely watch for Doug Nestor, 4-star offensive lineman, Ohio State commit. I think Georgia's going to push really hard for him. If I'm not mistaken, he's supposed to be in Athens this weekend for his official visit.
Big.
So be looking for that one. The one thing that you got to remember about Nestor, this is the furthest away option for him in terms of close to home. So Penn State, I've heard, feels confident about him as well. We'll see how it goes. I think that Georgia it will make headway this weekend. I think that he loves Sam Pittman, and that's a guy I'm never going to count out.
It's a long way from home.
And for Coach Pittman, let's get well card. He had knee replacement surgery.
I had no idea.
He's gotten it out. Going to be on the road pretty soon. But,
all right.
Wow.
He's ready. He wants to be a little bit more ornery on the field.
Maurice Carter sets us up with one name that I was going to drop on you. He says, with Hazelwood going to Oklahoma, will Georgia go after Pickens? And that's George Pickens, 5-star wide receiver, top 10 player in the nation. You better expect it. Yeah, you better bet.
Pickens is a bad ass.
Now, I've been bullish throughout that
yes.
He's not going to leave the state of Alabama. I said that if he wasn't going to Auburn, he'll go to Alabama. I'm starting to rethink that a little bit. I'm not saying Georgia's a leader here, but I think that they got a better chance than we initially thought. So watch out for George Pickens.
I don't mean to interrupt your train of thought there, but if you miss out, Georgia missed out on Jaden Hazelwood.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're getting George Pickens,
that's close to.
That's
not a consolation prize.
That is not. That is not like we went to Plan B.
Yeah,
you went from 1 to 1A.
Absolutely.
That kid is a freak of nature.
Roderick Price wants to know about Kyer Elam. I know Coach was asking about him as well. He played in the Under Armour game. Georgia's still very active in his recruitment. I am told that Florida still feels very confident about their positioning as well. They should. Close to home. They've got family ties there. I think that they're the big team to watch out for there. But Kyer, definitely a kid to watch down the stretch. Nick Cross is another guy at defensive back.
This is fascinating to me. Tell me about Nick Cross.
Nick Cross, 4-star defensive back, Florida State commit right now. Has been for some time. I committed
forever.
Has been, I think, since the beginning of last season. It got real quiet down the stretch. Visited Georgia very quietly. Didn't want to talk about the visit.
I remember that. That's hilarious. I'm here. Just don't tell anybody.
I asked
you were walking around the stadium.
I asked him. I said, "Can you talk to me about my visit?" He said, "I don't want anyone to write anything about my visit." But I talked to him out in San Antonio. Cross, a little bit more in play, I think, than folks might be giving it credit for. We thought that when Mel Tucker left, that might put the kibosh on it. He was his main recruiter, but he says Dan Lanning, Glenn Schumann, and Bakari Rambo have really picked up the slack there, and it looks like they're trying to push for his final official visit. He said he's not sure what he's going to do, but he said that there's a chance Georgia might get it, and if they do, watch out for that one. That kid had himself a great week out at the All-American game.
Yeah, covered a lot of ground. What about Darnell Wright?
Darnell Wright is the number 1 offensive tackle in America, obviously. 5-star guy. I'm still torn on him. Georgia is going to continue to push. They're going to hope to get an official visit. Tennessee is going to be really tough there as well as Alabama. I think those are the 2 options. Alabama, the numbers may not work out for them, but Tennessee's really the team I think to watch out for with Wright.
Well, in Alabama's case, you got a new line coach coming in too. So what's going to happen there? But I think Wright is Ryder Nestor one. We need to hopefully get one of those two.
I agree. I think that those are probably your two options right now on top. I think that those would be the guys to watch out for. We had a little something with Brian Bresee, who's 2025 star. Go check that out for sure. He had some great things to say about Georgia as well.
Isn't he the number 5 player in the nation?
He is the number 5 player in the nation, just
number
like Nolan Smith is this year. So that'd be
where's he out of?
Brian Bresee is out of Damascus, Maryland, about an hour outside of
Georgia's had zero luck out of pulling guys out of Rhode Island and Pennsylvania and Maryland up in that area. I'm just saying that's you can get Brian and I loved your story when he's talking about how close he is to guys like Nolan Smith and Trayvon Walker and how much I mean, if you read that story about, is it Bresee? Bresee. Again, this kid...
I told him that was the question everyone really wanted answered, was how the hell do you say your last name, kid?
I mean, the guy has a neck like a tree trunk, this square head. He's going to come off the edge and just absolutely destroy you. And if you can get him and Nolan Smith, in back-to-back years, that's ridiculous. So if Georgia's in on him, and they might actually be in on a 2020 quarterback as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Robbie Ashford, get over and check out that story from Trent Smallwood. Really good one with him. I think that's a kid to definitely keep your eye on.
Let me point one thing out too about there's negatory about guys leaving, and that's part of coaching. Florida lost them. You're going to see a lot of them out of Alabama. But I thought something that was really huge to me is when they had that little spot on the game out there that you were covering, where it showed the 4 Georgia signees, and it didn't have Stevenson at that point because he hadn't committed, but all of them putting on the Georgia hat, the way they acted together about how proud they were. Truss and Marshall and Smith and Dom was kind of carrying the ball there. Did you see that?
Yeah.
But they were all together, and pretty significant to see those 4 guys on a national television deal all coming to our school, you know what I mean? And then you add Stevenson in there, very impressive.
And then Dom gets 3 touchdowns in that game. That didn't hurt.
Yeah, he's going to be a great possession receiver, a guy that can make the sticks go. I mean, he's got it, and he really wants to be here. He'll be a good leader too. He'll be a lot like Terry, from that standpoint.
He's Chris Conley. I'm just letting people know.
I don't think he's as fast as Chris.
He may not be as fast, but I mean, for a guy who's going to make crazy catches,
right. Great representative,
crisp
you can't get enough of Don Blaylock as far as I'm concerned. But didn't you think that was good the way they looked?
Oh yeah.
I mean, to me,
it was a commercial for UGA right in the middle of all these guys who were watching the game, and
great showing.
And who's watching the game? All the 2020 and 2021 kids. So, I mean, I don't know how many adults are watching it, but all those recruits are watching it, and they see that Georgia commercial. And there was a good one in there for Notre Dame, too, as well. So
Oklahoma got one, too.
Yeah, but the Georgia one was good. And then to see Dom go off like that, if you're a wide receiver, you're thinking, well, heck, if Georgia's good enough for Don Blaylock.
Have you ever seen a class of receivers like Oklahoma just signed?
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
I've never seen anything like that.
It's absolutely tremendous to bring him, Theo Weiss, to Hazelwood, Theo Weiss, and Trajan Bridges.
They're going to have a ball machine throwing down. What'd you think of Rattler?
I thought he was okay, actually. I thought he played pretty well. I thought Mertz was the...
To me, he's not ready to play this year, do you?
No, I agree with that. I thought Mertz was the standout
machine.
John Hicks with a real quick recruiting question that we want to get to. He says, "Will Georgia get R.J. Henderson on campus?" This is a kid that committed to Florida after during the Under Armour All-American game.
He did not seem really confident in that decision.
He did not at all. And Trent
was like, "I'm going to Florida." Surely, you don't put a question mark on the end of it.
Well, that reminds me of Jaden Hazelwood saying, "We'll see how this works out." He said that when he committed on TV. He said, "Well, we'll see how this works out." I was like, wow, that's not a glaring endorsement. But R.J. Henderson will continue to take official visits. John wants to know, will Georgia get him on campus? I expect that they will before signing day. But it's just a matter of, what's going on with Pickens. And I think if they feel more confident in their chances with Pickens, they might slow play Henderson, focus their efforts there, and make Pickens know that, hey, we got to have you. You're the man.
And the thing about getting Pickens, besides the fact that he's just fantastic, is you also keep him away from Auburn, the team you have to play every year.
Yes.
So...
you better be ready for that barn being in the hay.
Yeah. So if you get a chance to cut down one of your rivals at the same time, increase again. I use it as the Cade Mays thing. You took Cade Mays. He started games where he was a true freshman, and he wasn't at Tennessee, and that's just it's a double win for you.
Exactly. That was big because but I tell you something that just galls or chaps my butt too. These coaches that sign guys and really sell their soul and, boy, you come play for me and all that. I'll tell you something just galled me yesterday was a read about Madison, who I think's a good coach, the D-line coach at Michigan.
Madison.
Greg Madison. He recruited Hinton, who we really wanted. He's got a brother coming up next year. And his basis for that was he coached his dad at Northwestern, and the kid fell in love with him. Now he's leaving and going to Ohio State as a co-defensive coordinator.
The mortal enemy.
And Hinton supposed to be going to Michigan to play for him. Hey, NCAA, let them get a deal and come on over here, Hinton, and bring your brother with you.
and here's the thing.
Isn't that right?
And
both of them.
To your point, this, to me,
studs.
We are seeing the same thing. We used to see this after signing day in February. All of a sudden, all these guys sign, and then you'd see all these coaches take jobs elsewhere. Now we're seeing that in December, after these guys sign, coaches are taking jobs elsewhere. If you're going to lock a kid in with his letter of intent and say you can't go anywhere, and then the coach can leave the next day, no buyout, new position on that, and the kid is stuck, that's not fair.
Well,
that's ridiculous. It's un-American.
You look at Temple, you look at Troy, look at...
Remember, Jeff Ulbrich tried to do it to Roquan Smith.
Absolutely.
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness somebody told him. And no, it wasn't you that told him, but you were there, and if there hadn't been a pause. And again, that was a kid who, if you remember Roquan Smith's announcement, he went under the table. He had gloves in a bag, 2 sets, 3 sets, or something like that. 2. He didn't know which one he was going to put on until he went underneath it, per your story.
That's true.
So he goes down there, comes up at UCLA. Everyone's like, oh, okay. But he doesn't sign because he's not sure. Then he finds out the UCLA coach is coming to the Falcons. I'm sure somebody on Georgia staff.
Is he still on the Falcons staff? They've had some changeovers on defense.
I do not think Jeff Ulbrich is still on the staff.
I don't think so.
Nobody's left but Dan Quinn.
Exactly. If you're looking for continuity, Cable East. That's our guys who are sponsoring our show for no good reason. They sponsor our show again. They don't get anything out of it, but thanks, Robert Wall, for doing that.
I take that back. Jeff Ulbrich is still with the Falcons.
What's his position?
He is the linebackers coach for the Falcons.
I see where Dan Quinn's going to call the defenses this year. Coming up.
Mine as well.
It can't get any worse.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, how about
At least we're not hiring Cliff Kingsbury, though.
Hey, Cliff.
Cliff's good. Look, don't get me wrong, but everybody's out there searching for Sean McVay in the league now. These young offensive minds, and I get it, but his record at Texas Tech did little to inspire me.
I guarantee if you coach on the Washington Redskins staff 4 years ago under Coach Shanahan, you got a chance to be a head coach.
That's very true.
You got Matt LaFleur just got the job at Green Bay. He was coaching there. You got McVay, who's out at L.A. now. You got over and over. Like I saw a defensive coach say, I could be a defensive coordinator in the NFL and can't get a job, but a guy that works in the film room for some of these gurus can get it. And that's the way they're looking at it.
Yep,
I mean, they're looking at it. And I told Roddy, too, I had this kid that my daughter used to babysit for him when he was a baby, and he's got a chance to, he's interviewed with all these people, and he hasn't been in the pros but a couple years. But, I mean, that's the way it goes.
Well, and I think that we saw that play out last night with the national championship. I mean, how often did you see Bama going for it on 4th down throughout the year?
That was a good fake.
Last night they did it a couple of times, because they know how quick strike that Clemson offense is. You've got to start taking those risks, and that's the way that the game's trending.
Clemson hadn't had any changes on their staff except D-line, I think, in like 5 years.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. We always talk about how hard Nick Saban works and his staff, how hard they work. We see the same thing Kirby Smart. Jeremy Pruitt had guys coming in at Tennessee on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day for 5-17. Those guys are coming in. They got staff meetings. It's just work. Clemson's got a different.
I don't think he's got anything on anybody else. That's not everybody does.
I'm just saying everybody's working their tails off. Clemson has a different feel altogether, and that staff is held together.
You just got to get some facilities is what they need.
Yeah. So I'm just saying that it's two different ways to skin a cat, and I think after watching that game, the person that's got to be happiest in the entire country has got to be Kirby Smart after seeing Nick Saban, his mentor, go for a fake field goal and just absolutely telegraph it It goes badly. And now it's not only Kirby Smart that fakes a punt. You had Nick Saban does it too.
It had a chance if the guy would block. The guy was it was still a bad call. I don't let. But the kicker just did a turn down on that guy. He was a lead blocker.
Georgia's fake had a chance, and it didn't work.
Yeah. All right, you're right.
So, all right, we've got to save something for next week.
No, we got all your recruiting stuff.
Well, who else we got that's got a heartbeat out there that you're still after?
Oh, there's tons of guys. I mean, I think
just named 7.
Yeah, I know.
You think we got 3 places, eh?
Yeah, I'd say.
And we still got to get a transfer or a JUCO tight end, mate.
True.
And next week we might have some news on the coaching search.
There you go. So,
well, we could.
Well, do you think? It seems
it's got to happen.
Eventually, it's going to happen. Maybe before spring practice, we'll know who Georgia's defensive coordinator is.
I think. Don't question this guy on personnel. He knows.
Oh, I'm not. I'm just saying we might have some news to talk about next week.
We're not going to, unless the guy. There's not going to be a defensive coordinator here that's not from the Kirby tree.
That's true.
You just got that system. He's not going to be able to learn that. But maybe somebody get a co-title or something like that. But
and my thing to watch for there, it's not as important with the level of defensive experience this staff has. But it is good for recruiting down here the next couple weeks.
Who's my coach?
Yeah,
exactly. The secondary or linebacker, if you move Schumann to the secondary, who's the coach? Guys want to know that.
Yep.
That's why it's so unbelievable, really, that we were able to hold on to Stevenson because Coley did a great job. But I think the flux that Miami had helped us a little bit there too. There wasn't it's up in the air on that.
Absolutely.
But Stevenson's big coup there.
Anyway, that's all the time we have for this week's show. Be sure to tune in next Tuesday. We'll have a lot more for you. Big shout out to Athens Ford, Aaron and Overhead Doors, Your Pie, Academia Brewing Company, Cable East, 365 Game Day, and, of course, Champies here on Baxter Street and 11 Alive for letting us be on their page. Be sure to check out UGASports.com for all the latest recruiting updates, team updates, coaching updates, analysis. Yeah, we need to mention UGASports.com because that is kind of who pays the bills around here. So thanks for being a member, and thanks for watching our show, and we will talk to you guys next week.
That's it for this episode of the UGA Sports Live Podcast. Tune in next week for more Georgia Bulldogs news and notes from Athens.